A billionaire thought he had seen it all until a young waitress crawling on the floor to help his son showed him the true meaning of kindness. Jonathan Hale was not the kind of man who usually had free time. His life was a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and boardrooms filled with discussions about billion-dollar deals. He had everything money could buy: luxurious homes, fast cars, and private jets, yet the one thing he treasured most was his 6-year-old son, Evan. Despite his hectic schedule, Jonathan had promised himself that he would spend more time with Evan, especially after realizing that his busy life had left the little boy feeling a bit neglected. One sunny Saturday morning, Jonathan decided to take Evan out for breakfast at a small family restaurant near their neighborhood. It wasn't one of the fancy high-end places Jonathan usually visited. The restaurant was simple, with checkered tablecloths, wooden chairs, and the smell of fresh pancakes in the air. He wanted to show Evan that fun didn't always come with price tags, and that sometimes the simplest moments could be the most memorable. Evan was bouncing in his seat, his little feet swinging under the table. He had brought along his favorite toy car, a bright red miniature sports car that he never let go of. It was worn from love and countless adventures in the living room, but to Evan, it was priceless. He clutched it tightly in his hands as Jonathan tried to catch up on a few emails on his phone before ordering breakfast. The restaurant was busier than expected, with families chatting and laughing and the clatter of dishes filling the air. Jonathan had just started talking on his phone, negotiating a contract with one of his business partners, when he noticed Evan frowning. Before he could even look up properly, he realized that Evan's toy car had rolled off the table and slipped under the bench. Evan tried to reach for it with his tiny hands, but it was just out of reach. Panic flashed across his face. He let out a small whimper. Jonathan's first instinct was to put his phone down and help, but the call was important. He glanced around the restaurant, hoping for someone to notice, but most of the staff were busy attending to other tables. That's when he saw her, a young waitress, moving quickly between tables, balancing plates and trays effortlessly. She noticed Evan's distress immediately. Without hesitation, she dropped to her hands and knees and crawled under the table. Jonathan watched in surprise as she stretched her arm into the small space beneath the bench and retrieved the toy car. She handed it to Evan with a warm smile, her eyes kind and patient. Evan's frown disappeared instantly, replaced by a relieved grin. He hugged the toy tightly, as if it had been missing forever. The waitress straightened up, dusted off her uniform, gave Jonathan a polite nod before returning to her duties. Jonathan felt a strange mix of emotions. In his world, people were usually polite but distant, motivated by money or ambition. Acts of genuine kindness were rare. Seeing this young woman crawl on the floor to help a child, without hesitation or complaint, struck something deep inside him. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes about her character: selfless, caring, and attentive. He observed her for a moment, trying to read her expression. There was no pretense, no act for praise or attention. She was just helping because it was the right thing to do. Jonathan realized that he had spent so much of his life chasing success that he had almost forgotten the power of small acts of kindness. And here was this waitress, showing it effortlessly. Evan, meanwhile, couldn't stop talking about what had happened. "Daddy, she helped me. She got my car. She's so nice," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Jonathan smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that no amount of wealth could ever buy. He ruffled Evan's hair and thanked the waitress quietly as she passed by. She nodded again, still focused on her work, as if the moment had been nothing out of the ordinary. As they waited for their breakfast, Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about her. He watched the way she interacted with other children, patiently refilling their glasses and gently guiding them if they spilled something. She seemed to have a natural gift for empathy, something Jonathan admired deeply but rarely saw in his corporate world. He realized that Evan had witnessed something important too, a lesson in kindness and compassion that he hoped would stay with him forever by the time their pancakes arrived. Jonathan felt a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in months. For a few precious minutes, the noise of the city, the stress of deals, and the weight of responsibility faded away. All that mattered was his son laughing, enjoying his meal, and the quiet heroics of a young waitress who had reminded him of a truth often lost in his life: that true greatness wasn't always measured in money or power, but in the small, meaningful actions that touched others' lives as they finished breakfast. Jonathan made a silent promise to himself. He didn't know how or when, but he wanted to show the waitress that her kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. He wanted to learn more about her story, to understand the person behind the simple act that had left such a profound impression on him. Little did he know that this single morning at a small restaurant would mark the beginning of a chain of events that would change not just her life, but his and Evan's as well. And for Evan, the day would remain etched in his memory. Not because of the pancakes or the fun outing, but because he had seen someone care so completely for him. Someone who acted with pure kindness, without expecting anything in return. Jonathan, watching his son beam with joy, realized that in that small moment, the waitress had taught both of them a lesson worth more than any business deal or fortune: that compassion, attention, and human warmth were treasures far beyond measure. Jonathan couldn't stop thinking about the young waitress even after leaving the restaurant that morning. Her simple act of kindness had left a mark on him in a way he didn't expect. As a billionaire, he was used to people doing things for recognition, reward, or obligation. But what he had witnessed was pure and unselfish. He wanted to know more about her, not in a way that was intrusive, but to understand the person who had shown such warmth and care to his son, Evan. The next day, Jonathan decided to return to the restaurant. Not for breakfast this time, but to speak to her directly. He wanted to express his gratitude properly, not just as a customer, but as someone who had been deeply moved by her actions. When he arrived, the restaurant was bustling with the usual Saturday morning crowd. He spotted her immediately. She was carrying plates with a bright smile, moving gracefully between tables. Watching her, Jonathan noticed how natural she was with people. She laughed gently with the children she served, reassured nervous customers, and handled small accidents with calm patience. He waited for a moment until she had a brief break. As she wiped her hands on her apron, Jonathan approached her, careful not to startle her. "Excuse me," he said politely. "I wanted to thank you for what you did yesterday, helping my son. It meant a lot." Maya looked at him, a little surprised. She wasn't used to being personally thanked, especially not by someone who seemed so important. She shrugged lightly, her modesty showing. "Oh, it was nothing. He just needed his toy. I'm glad he got it back," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was a sincerity in it that struck Jonathan immediately. Jonathan insisted on talking for a few minutes. They stepped aside to a quieter corner of the restaurant, and he began asking gentle questions about her life. Not as a billionaire questioning a waitress, but as someone genuinely interested in her story. Maya shared that she worked long hours at the restaurant to support her younger brother, who had serious medical needs. She was responsible for paying his bills, keeping their apartment, and making sure they had food on the table. Despite the weight on her shoulders, she never complained. And she smiled while telling Jonathan about the struggles they faced. He listened in silence, moved by her resilience. She spoke with such honesty, not asking for help or pity, but simply explaining the reality of her life. Jonathan was taken aback by her humility and strength. Here was someone who had so little in material terms, yet carried herself with dignity and compassion. She seemed to embody everything he respected, but rarely encountered in his world of wealth and influence. For a moment, he felt almost embarrassed by the trappings of his own life, realizing that all the money and success in the world couldn't match the depth of character this young woman displayed. Maya's story resonated with Jonathan more than he expected. He asked her about her dreams, wondering if she had hopes beyond working long hours to make ends meet. She hesitated for a moment before confessing that she had always wanted to go back to school and finish her college degree. But life's challenges had made it impossible so far. Jonathan nodded thoughtfully, feeling a spark of admiration and concern at the same time. He realized that someone with her dedication and heart deserved a chance to pursue her dreams, something most people with her responsibilities never even dared to consider. As they continued talking, Evan wandered nearby, occasionally peeking over the edge of the table to smile at Maya. He had not forgotten the kindness she had shown him the day before. Jonathan noticed the way Evan's eyes lit up whenever she looked at him, how he felt safe and cared for in her presence. That simple, unselfish act had built a bridge between them instantly. Jonathan realized that Maya's influence on his son could be profound. She had shown Evan what it meant to be kind, helpful, and compassionate, lessons that no amount of wealth could teach. By the time their conversation ended, Jonathan felt a growing sense of connection and responsibility. He couldn't just leave things as they were. Her situation weighed on him, not out of obligation, but because he saw the real value of people like Maya, those who quietly carried the burdens of life with grace, strength, and unwavering kindness. He left the restaurant that day, thinking deeply about how he could make a difference, not as a patron, but as a human being who had been touched by her actions. Over the next few days, Jonathan couldn't shake the image of her crawling under the table for Evan. It was a small act. Yet it had revealed so much about her character, something he rarely saw in his business dealings. In his high-powered world, gestures were calculated, interactions had agendas, and kindness often came with strings attached. But Maya's simple, selfless act reminded him of the human side of life he had neglected. He remembered his late wife, who had always taught him that compassion was more valuable than money, and that small gestures of kindness often created lasting impacts. Watching Maya, he felt that same principle alive in front of him. Jonathan began thinking of ways to understand her life better, not just in passing, but to truly grasp the challenges she faced daily. He wanted to help in a way that was meaningful, not just a token gesture. But he also wanted to do it respectfully, ensuring Maya felt seen as a person, not as a charity case. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that sometimes the most profound lessons came from the simplest. Moments like watching someone crawl on the floor to help a child retrieve a toy. For Evan, the encounter had already made a lasting impression. He kept talking about the nice lady at breakfast and how she had helped him when he was upset. Jonathan noticed that his son was learning from her example how to show gratitude, how to recognize and value kindness, and how even small actions could make a big difference. This made Jonathan reflect on the kind of role model he wanted to be for Evan. He realized that being wealthy and successful was meaningless if he couldn't teach his son the importance of empathy, humility, and humanity. The conversation with Maya had also changed Jonathan in subtle ways. He felt inspired to pause and pay more attention to the people around him, to listen, to acknowledge, and to support when he could. Maya's story reminded him that life's value wasn't measured only in dollars and deals, but in the strength of character, compassion, and courage that people carried in their hearts. Jonathan left the restaurant that day, feeling that he had not only learned about Maya's life, but had been given a rare gift, a glimpse into the power of human kindness and resilience that money could never buy. He drove home with Evan, the city rushing past in a blur, yet inside the car, a quiet peace settled over him. He thought about the struggles Maya faced, the way she smiled despite them, and the lessons she had already unknowingly taught his son. Jonathan made a mental note to find a way to help her, not as a billionaire giving money, but as a person who had been touched and inspired by someone's selfless actions. The encounter had planted a seed, and he knew it would grow into something meaningful, something that could change lives. For Jonathan, Maya had become more than just a waitress at a small restaurant. She was a reminder that courage, kindness, integrity could exist in the most unexpected places, and that these qualities were more powerful than wealth or fame. And for Evan, she had become a hero, someone who showed him that even in a world full of adults rushing by, small acts of care could make someone feel safe, loved, and understood. Jonathan realized that he had witnessed something extraordinary in the simplest of moments, and he knew that he couldn't let it go unnoticed or unappreciated. Jonathan could not stop thinking about Maya, her story, her courage, and the way she had cared for his son had left a lasting impression on him. Even in his world of boardrooms, luxury cars, and private jets, he felt that something about her was extraordinary. He wanted to understand her life better, not out of curiosity, but because he genuinely cared. He knew he could not just offer a simple thank you and walk away. He wanted to see how she lived, what challenges she faced, and what kept her going despite everything. He began quietly asking around, trying to learn more without drawing attention? Jonathan did not want to make Maya feel uncomfortable or treated like a charity case. He simply wanted to understand her reality. He started with small questions to the restaurant staff, learning that she worked long shifts, often 12 hours a day, and yet still found energy to smile and help everyone. They spoke about how she always stayed late, made sure children were safe, and often went beyond her duties without complaint. Jonathan realized that she was not only dedicated to her job, but that she had a remarkable sense of responsibility that went far beyond the ordinary. Using his resources carefully and discreetly, Jonathan asked his assistant to gather more information about Maya's life. He wanted to know what challenges she faced and how he might be able to help. The more he learned, the more he was struck by her resilience. Maya lived in a small apartment with her younger brother, who was sick and required constant medical attention. She had taken on this responsibility at a very young age. And despite the emotional and financial pressure, she remained optimistic and hardworking. Jonathan was moved not by her struggles alone, but by her attitude. She did not complain. She did not seek sympathy. She simply carried on doing what she needed to do. With grace and courage that most adults would find overwhelming, Jonathan reflected on the contrast between his life and hers. In the past, he had been focused on deals, profit margins, and status. He had money, influence, and power. But he realized that he had often overlooked what truly mattered: empathy, kindness, and human connection. Watching Maya reminded him of the lessons his late wife had tried to teach him, that real value in life is measured not by wealth, but by character, integrity, and the ability to care for others. Jonathan felt a quiet shame and admiration simultaneously. He had been chasing success at the expense of simple, meaningful connections. And here was someone living a life of quiet heroism, shaping it with compassion and perseverance. One evening, Jonathan decided to visit the apartment building where Maya lived. He did not want to surprise her, and he certainly did not want to make her feel judged or pitied. He simply wanted to see the conditions she lived in, to understand what she endured every day. The building was modest, with peeling paint and a worn-out lobby. But Jonathan noticed something important: the sense of care she put into her small space. Her apartment was simple, yet tidy and organized. He could see that despite her struggles, Maya took pride in her home and her life. That moment reinforced his growing admiration. Jonathan began imagining ways he could help her without taking away her dignity. He realized that what she needed most was stability and opportunity. Money could help, yes, but what she truly needed was a way to build a future, a way to finish her education, support her brother, and live without constant fear of eviction or financial ruin. He thought about how different their lives were, and yet how much he could learn from her. Her resilience, selflessness, and patience were qualities he had not valued enough in himself. And now he felt a strong urge to support her in a way that would honor those qualities. He started planning carefully. Jonathan wanted to make a meaningful difference, not just a momentary relief. He consulted his advisors and foundation to understand the best ways to provide educational support and medical assistance without compromising her independence. He envisioned scholarships, long-term support for her brother's medical care, and a job opportunity that would allow her to grow and thrive. But beyond the logistics, he also wanted to ensure that she felt respected, not like a recipient of charity. Jonathan knew that real help was not just about money, it was about empowerment, dignity, and trust. Meanwhile, Maya continued her daily routine, unaware of the plans Jonathan was quietly forming. She worked tirelessly at the restaurant, juggling the demands of her job with the constant care her brother required. Some nights she returned home exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open, yet she never complained. Her dedication was extraordinary, and Jonathan felt a mix of awe and concern. How did someone so young manage so much, day after day, without breaking down? He thought about Evan, his son, and how this woman's kindness had touched him so deeply. Jonathan realized that her influence went beyond the immediate. She was shaping lives through her actions, teaching lessons of empathy and courage simply by living them. Jonathan also started noticing how small gestures mattered. He remembered watching her interact with the children at the restaurant, gently guiding them, offering encouragement, and showing attention to the smallest needs. These were not grand acts, but they left lasting impressions. He realized that kindness could ripple outward in unexpected ways, touching hearts far beyond the initial moment. For him, witnessing this was a revelation, an understanding that life's true impact was often hidden in ordinary, unnoticed actions. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan continued his discreet observations and planning. He learned that Maya had almost given up on finishing school because of her responsibilities, and that she lived under constant financial stress. Yet she remained optimistic, always finding ways to bring joy to those around her. Jonathan thought about the contrast between his wealth, where problems could often be solved with a phone call or a check, and her reality, where determination and endurance were the only tools available. He realized that supporting her meant more than financial aid. It meant creating opportunities for a brighter future, one that matched the dedication she had already shown. Jonathan began imagining the moment he would meet her again. He wanted to surprise her, yes, but more importantly, he wanted to offer help in a way that recognized her hard work and character. He did not want to pity her. He wanted to empower her. This required thought, planning, and sensitivity. He consulted quietly with people he trusted, outlining educational support, housing stability, and medical assistance for her brother. Each step was designed to ensure that she felt respected, valued, and encouraged, rather than simply assisted. Finally, Jonathan realized that his connection to Maya was more than a passing act of gratitude. Her story had awakened something in him, a desire to act meaningfully, to honor human kindness, and to use his resources to make a real difference. Her resilience, compassion, and humility had challenged him to rethink his priorities, to consider the impact of small actions, and to recognize the profound strength that ordinary people can carry. Jonathan knew that helping Maya could change her life, but he also understood that it would change his own, reminding him of what truly mattered, beyond wealth, power, and status, in quiet moments. Jonathan reflected on the lessons Maya had already given him. He thought about her patience, her courage, and her unwavering kindness despite adversity. He thought about Evan, who had witnessed her actions, learning the value of empathy firsthand. Jonathan realized that these lessons were priceless, far more valuable than any business success he had achieved. And with that understanding, he committed himself to act carefully and respectfully, to support Maya in a way that would honor her dignity and allow her to continue living with strength, courage, and hope. Jonathan could hardly wait for another chance to see Maya. After spending weeks quietly learning about her life and challenges, he felt a strong desire to meet her again in person. This time, it wasn't just about gratitude. He wanted to understand her struggles more deeply and see how he could help in a meaningful way. But he was careful. He did not want to overwhelm her or make her feel judged, pitied, or uncomfortable. He wanted the meeting to be natural, sincere, and respectful. 1 week later, Jonathan decided to take Evan to the same restaurant again. The boy was excited. He remembered the waitress who had helped him retrieve his toy car and spoke about her constantly. He wanted to see her again, not fully understanding why she mattered so much, but feeling her kindness had made a difference to him. When they arrived, however, they discovered that Maya was not working that day. Jonathan asked a few of the restaurant staff discreetly and learned that she had not been feeling well and had gone home early. Jonathan felt a pang of concern. He wondered if everything was all right and hoped she was safe. A thought struck him. He wanted to see her personally, to understand what she faced outside the restaurant. With Evan by his side, he decided to visit the area where she lived, determined to approach with care and empathy. Jonathan had already learned a little about her apartment and the challenges she faced, but seeing her life firsthand would give him a better sense of how he could truly help. When they arrived, Jonathan noticed the modest building immediately. It was simple, with faded paint, a few cracks in the walls, and a small worn-out lobby. The environment was nothing like the luxury Jonathan was used to, and yet he felt a quiet admiration for anyone living there with dignity. He had seen the resilience of Maya through her actions at the restaurant, and now he wanted to witness it in her daily life as they waited near the building. Jonathan noticed Maya sitting outside, her face pale and troubled. She held her head in her hands, and there was a visible weight on her shoulders. Jonathan's heart sank. He realized that her struggles were immediate and pressing, perhaps even worse than he had imagined. Evan spotted her first and ran toward her with a smile. "Hi, you helped me last week?" he said, holding out his toy car. Maya looked up, and her expression softened instantly. She forced a small smile, but her worry was still visible. Evan's innocence broke through a little of her tension. She crouched down to greet him. Jonathan stepped forward carefully. "Maya, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said softly. She shook her head, looking embarrassed but grateful. Jonathan noticed that the sight of him in his suit, next to a young child, did not intimidate her. She simply saw another person willing to listen. He asked gently, "Is everything all right? You look worried." Maya hesitated at first. She was not used to opening up about her problems, especially to someone she barely knew. But seeing Jonathan's genuine concern and Evan's innocent excitement at seeing her again, she felt a small spark of trust. Slowly, she began to explain. She talked about the eviction notice she had received earlier that week. She and her brother were struggling to pay rent, and the hospital bills for her brother were piling up faster than she could manage. She described how exhausting it had been, working long hours at the restaurant while trying to care for him. Her voice shook at times, but there was no complaint, only a tired honesty. Jonathan listened quietly, taking in every word. He felt a mix of admiration and concern. Realizing how much she had carried on her own, Evan, unaware of the gravity of the situation, held out his toy car again. "Here, this is yours," he said, offering it with wide-eyed sincerity. Maya chuckled softly, tears threatening in her eyes. The toy car, insignificant to most adults, symbolized a connection and trust between them. Jonathan noticed how these small gestures brought moments of light even in difficult times, and he reflected on how important human kindness truly was. "Jonathan," then asked gently if Maya would like to sit and talk more privately. She nodded, a little hesitant, but sensing no judgment. They walked to a small bench nearby, where the noise of the street softened and they could speak openly. Jonathan encouraged her to share more about her dreams, the things she wished for in life beyond the daily struggles. Maya took a deep breath. She admitted she had always wanted to complete her college degree, pursue a better future for herself and her brother, and have a stable life without constant fear of losing their home or struggling to afford medical care. Jonathan was struck by her honesty and humility. Even while facing immense pressure, she still held on to hope and dreams. Her strength impressed him, but he also felt the weight of the unfairness of her situation. Here was a young woman doing everything right, yet life had placed nearly impossible challenges in her path. Jonathan knew he could not solve all her problems instantly, but he realized he could help her take the first steps toward a better future. He thought carefully about how to do so with respect and dignity. They talked for hours, with Evan playing quietly nearby, occasionally interjecting questions or showing Maya something he drew in his notebook. Jonathan observed how Maya's demeanor softened in his presence. It's not because of money or status, but because she felt heard and understood. He realized that many people in her life might have offered help, but rarely took the time to truly listen. He wanted to be different, not someone providing charity, but someone offering support in a way that would empower her. Jonathan quietly explained that he had the means to assist her in pursuing her education, provide stability for her living situation, and help with her brother's medical needs. He emphasized that this was not charity, but an opportunity, a way for her efforts and dedication to finally be rewarded. Maya was overwhelmed, speechless at first. She had never imagined that someone would care enough to understand her situation and offer such help without strings attached. Jonathan reassured her, saying that he only wanted to honor her dedication, courage, and selflessness. Evan, sensing the change in the atmosphere, smiled up at Maya. "See? Good things can happen," he said cheerfully. Maya laughed softly, tears now freely falling. She had never experienced this kind of kindness, where help came without judgment, and someone recognized her struggles and efforts. Jonathan watched quietly, understanding that this moment was more than just aid. It was validation, respect, and a spark of hope for her future. As the day ended, Jonathan and Evan left, promising to return soon. Maya watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief, disbelief, and gratitude. She realized that her life could change, and that the kindness she had shown to a child 1 week ago had come full circle in a way she had never imagined. Jonathan, on the other hand, felt a profound satisfaction, not because of wealth or power, but because he had connected with someone extraordinary, learned from her resilience, and had the chance to make a meaningful difference. That encounter remained etched in their memories. For Maya, it was a turning point, the moment she realized that the universe could provide a helping hand. When she had been so diligent and kind to others. For Jonathan, it was a revelation the moment he saw how acts of compassion, humility, and strength could ripple outward and transform lives. And for Evan, it was confirmation that the world had people who could be heroes, not because of power or fame, but because of kindness and courage. Jonathan left that day knowing that the next step was crucial. He had to turn his plans into reality. Helping Maya would require careful thought, respect, and patience, but he was determined. He had witnessed the power of human resilience and kindness firsthand, and was inspired to ensure that Maya's life, her brother's, would improve in a way that honored their dignity. That small meeting on the bench, under the afternoon sun, marked the beginning of a transformation that would change all their lives forever. Jonathan could not stop thinking about Maya after their meeting on the bench. Her courage, resilience, and selflessness had left a mark on him that he could not ignore. He realized that he had the power to make a real difference in her life, not just a small gesture, but something that could truly transform her future. He spent days carefully planning how to approach it, ensuring that whatever he did would respect her dignity and empower her, rather than make her feel like a charity case. Early one morning, Jonathan and Evan arrived at Maya's apartment building again. This time, he was prepared. He knew that Maya had been facing constant stress over her rent and her brother's medical bills. He wanted to give her hope without overwhelming her. As they approached, they saw her sitting on the steps outside, looking tired and worried. The eviction notice had not yet been resolved, and the weight of her responsibilities seemed to be pressing down on her. Jonathan felt a deep sympathy, but also a determination. He knew this was the moment to help in a way that would matter. Evan ran ahead, waving and calling out to Maya. "Hi, remember me? Your friend," he said, holding up the toy car he always carried. Maya looked up and forced a small smile, hiding the anxiety in her eyes. Jonathan walked beside her slowly and gently. "Maya," he said softly, "I wanted to see you again and make sure you were okay." Her expression shifted slightly. She was wary, unsure of what to expect, but something about Jonathan's calm, genuine demeanor made her relax a little. Jonathan asked if they could sit together, and Maya agreed. The three of them found a quiet corner, away from the noise of the street. Jonathan began by listening. He wanted to hear more about her struggles, about the daily challenges she faced while caring for her brother and working long hours. Maya hesitated at first, but the trust she had begun to feel in their previous meeting made it easier for her to open up. She explained the long hours at the restaurant, the constant worry about medical bills, the fear of losing her home, and how she often went without sleep just to make sure her brother had what he needed. Her voice was tired but steady, filled with courage and determination. Jonathan felt a mix of admiration and concern. He had seen many people struggle, but Maya's strength was extraordinary. Even in the face of hardship, she never lost hope or compassion. Jonathan realized that her resilience deserved recognition and support, not just acknowledgement. He wanted to give her more than temporary relief. He wanted to help her build a stable and secure future. Finally, Jonathan gently explained that he had the means to help her in a significant way. He spoke about providing her with a scholarship to complete her college education, ensuring that she could finish her degree without financial stress. He offered support for her brother's medical care, covering treatments and bills so she would not have to worry constantly. He also proposed a stable job opportunity, one that would allow her to grow professionally while continuing to care for her brother. Jonathan emphasized that this support was not charity. It was a way to honor her dedication, hard work, and integrity. Maya was stunned. She had never expected such generosity or thoughtfulness. Her life had been a constant struggle, and the idea that someone recognized her effort and wanted to support her dreams seemed almost unreal. She looked at Jonathan, searching for a catch or hidden condition, but there was none. He simply wanted to help her create a better future, and his sincerity was clear. Tears welled up in her eyes as the realization sank in. For the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope. Evan, sensing the gravity of the moment in his own innocent way, handed Maya the toy car again. "See? Good things can happen," he said with a bright smile. Maya laughed softly through her tears, feeling the warmth of the moment and the kindness surrounding her. Jonathan watched quietly, understanding that this encounter was about more than money or opportunities. It was about restoring hope and showing that human compassion still mattered. Maya's reaction was a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She struggled to find words, overwhelmed by the generosity and care she had received. Jonathan reassured her, saying that she had earned this opportunity through her hard work, dedication, and the love she showed her brother. He emphasized that he admired her strength and wanted to support her in achieving her dreams, not out of pity, but out of respect and recognition of her character. In the days that followed, Jonathan and his team worked to put their plans into action. The scholarship was arranged, the medical bills were taken care of, and a stable job position was prepared for Maya to start once her studies were underway. Throughout the process, Jonathan ensured that everything was handled with discretion and respect, so that Maya felt empowered rather than dependent. When Maya received the official letters and documentation, she could hardly believe it. The scholarship covered her tuition completely. Her brother's medical treatments were fully arranged, and she had a secure job waiting for her. She felt an overwhelming sense of relief and gratitude, but more importantly, she felt seen and valued. It was as if the universe had finally recognized her dedication and courage, and she could now take a deep breath and envision a future without constant fear and struggle. Jonathan watched Maya's transformation with quiet satisfaction. He realized that the encounter had changed not just her life, but his own as well. Seeing her strength, resilience, and kindness had reminded him of what truly mattered: compassion, human connection, and the impact of small, meaningful actions. He reflected on how a simple act of crawling under a table to help a child had led to a chain of events that transformed lives. Evan, too, felt the impact. He had witnessed Maya's struggles, her courage, and now her hope for the future. The lessons he had learned through her actions were priceless: kindness, empathy, and the importance of helping others without expectation. For a child, seeing real-life compassion in action was far more powerful than any story or lesson could be taught. Maya began to rebuild her life. She focused on her studies with renewed determination, knowing that she had a strong support system behind her. Her brother received the care he needed without the constant worry that had consumed both their lives. And through it all, she carried the memory of the day she helped Evan, and the day Jonathan chose to honor her efforts and provide her with hope. Jonathan, on the other hand, carried a different kind of transformation. He realized that wealth and success were hollow without connection and compassion. Helping Maya had reminded him of his late wife's teachings about the importance of kindness and human dignity. He felt a renewed purpose, knowing that he could use his resources to make a real difference in the lives of those who deserved it most. In the months that followed, Jonathan continued to stay in touch with Maya, not to monitor her, but to support and encourage her. He saw her grow stronger, more confident, and more hopeful. Evan often visited, bringing small toys or drawing pictures to share, and the bond between them deepened. It was a relationship built on trust, respect, and shared humanity. Not wealth or status, Maya often reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. She thought about the day she crawled under the table to help a little boy, never imagining that such a simple act could ripple outward and create such profound change. She realized that her kindness, resilience, and dedication had not gone unnoticed, and that the universe had responded in kind. Jonathan, too, learned a lesson he would carry forever. He understood that true impact came not from power or wealth alone, but from seeing people, understanding their struggles, and acting with compassion. That small moment in a restaurant had reminded him that even in a world dominated by money and success, humanity, kindness, and courage remain the most valuable forces, and so life changed for all of them. Maya's future was no longer defined by fear and struggle. Evan learned the importance of empathy and gratitude, and Jonathan rediscovered the meaning of true wealth, the wealth of human connection, kindness, and the power to transform lives. The encounter, which began with a small act of crawling under a table to help a child, had become a story of hope, compassion, and lasting change.